Well, welcome via video. Obviously, I can't be there today for the class. I appreciate Celeste playing this. You should have already had your quiz. Hope that went well. And we left off at Nehemiah, so that's how far the quiz went. So please go ahead and open your Bibles to the next book, which is Esther. Again, go ahead and find Esther. If I were there, I'd say raise your hand. Obviously, I can't see you on this one-way video. But just take a moment to find Esther. Again, a pivotal book for Jewish history. A couple things up front. Interesting about Esther, the book of Esther is the only book of the Bible that doesn't mention God. And so that's kind of a head scratcher. Well, how did it make it? And you'll probably see the importance of the narrative of this story in Jewish history. Okay, we already looked at Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra, the priest that restored temple worship practice. Nehemiah, the cupbearer, the governor who came and rebuilt the walls. Now, Queen Esther actually precedes them. I've said this before, that the order of the books of the Bible are not necessarily chronological time-wise. And so the events of Esther take place just a few years before Ezra travels back to Jerusalem. Okay, by now you should have found the book of Esther. And it begins now, it took place in the days of Ahasuerus. Okay, I've mentioned the king Xerxes, and I mentioned the movie 300, the Spartans. That is the same king. Ahasuerus is the same king, a different name for him, that is called Xerxes many times in Persian accounts. And so he is the father of the king that where Nehemiah served as the cupbearer. And so that's the progression here. So you have the king, chapter 1, he has a big banquet. In fact, some people place this banquet right before he departs for his campaigns in Greece, which includes the battle there of Thermopylae with the Spartans. So imagine this, he's invited all the leaders, the royal, the nobility, and they're having this big party, and he says, someone tell the queen to come, Vashti. And so probably to show her off, his trophy wife, and lo and behold, she says no. And that just wasn't done. But she does. She refuses to come to the banquet. Well, that's embarrassing for the king. It becomes actually a controversy. And so if you're in chapter 1, I want to pick up, let's look at verse 16. That in the presence of the king and the princes, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also all the princes and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands by saying, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought to his presence, but she didn't come. This day the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's conduct will speak in the same way to all the king's princes, and there will be plenty of contempt and anger. If it pleases the king, let a royal edict be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, so that it cannot be repealed, that Vashti, that's the queen, may no longer come into the presence of King Ahasuerus. It's kind of comical if you read between the lines there. He's saying, King, if you don't do anything, then all of our wives are going to act like that. That you told your wife to come, she didn't come, so probably next week I'll tell my wife to come, and she won't come. And so obviously a patriarchal system. And so the king does. He signs this. Queen Vashti is no longer the queen. She can no longer come into my presence. So the last verse of chapter 1. So the king sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province according to its script, and to every people according to their language, that every man should be the master in his own house, and the one who speaks in the language of his own people. And so it's kind of funny that there's an edict that wives, you got to obey your husbands. And so that was, again, back in 475 BC, give or take. So what happens next? Well, the king needs to replace the queen. And so he's advised to have a beauty contest. It's kind of like Cinderella. You know, when the prince is looking for a wife, and they have a contest, and all the beautiful women come, and not so beautiful women in the Cinderella story. And so he sends out people to vet all the beautiful women across the empire, and one that is a finalist, her name is Esther. And so let's find two main characters. I want you to catch two Jewish characters. One is named Mordecai, and the other is Esther. So in chapter 2, verse 5, we see, now there was at the citadel in Susa, that's the capital where Ahasuerus the king lives, a Jew whose name was Mordecai, and it gives his lineage there, who'd been taken into exile. And this Jewish man is a God-fearing, he loves the Lord, he tries to keep the covenant. His cousin is Esther. Her name is also Hadassah. Her parents died, and so Mordecai took her in to care for her as his own daughter. And so that's the main characters there, the Jewish characters, Mordecai and Esther. Ahasuerus is the king. And so Esther makes the final cut. And so she's brought to the capital, and it doesn't tell us how many women, but several dozen probably are brought there. Later in chapter 2, she's cared for, she's given access to oils and perfumes, and prepared for the night with the king. In fact, there's a movie, A Night with the King. That's what it's about. It's about Esther. And so these potential queens are allowed to take in like a special item or something. And so she's coached. And verse 15 says, now when the turn of Esther, there's a line here, the daughter of, and then gives her lineage there in Mordecai, came to go into the king. She did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And so she was well liked. She was like Miss Congeniality probably in the beauty contest. And she finds favor with the king. It doesn't go into details. I don't think we need details. But she is chosen to be the queen. All right? And so when you get into chapter 3, now we meet another character. If I had a board, I would write so that you would remember Esther, Mordecai. The third name here is Haman. All right? Haman is a bad guy. All right? So he is one of the leaders under the king, and he is very ambitious, and he rises very quickly. He's also very self-centered, very arrogant. And when you read into chapter 3, when he enters into the gate, all the people bow down to him because he's such a prestigious leader, except one, Mordecai. And the Jewish Mordecai cannot bow down to another man. Well, it just eats at him. And so he wants his revenge. And so the main part of the story is that he decides he is going to wipe out all Jews. Okay, not just Mordecai. That wouldn't be enough. And so we pick up in verse 8. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all the other people. They do not observe the king's laws, or it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. So again, the king doesn't really know what he's talking about. But Haman is like, so do I have your permission to wipe them out? And the king's basically like, fine, whatever you want to do. And so he actually casts lots, like rolls dice, to determine what day will be the execution day. And so he throws the lot, and that's going to be important. And then a certain month is chosen, a certain day of that month is chosen. And so now word gets out that on that day, the forces of the Persian Empire are going to attack the Jews and annihilate them. Well, word gets to Mordecai. So Mordecai sends word to Esther and commands her to say, Esther, you've got to go to the king and you've got to tell him about this plot. Well, Esther says, I can't go to the king unless he summons me. It is very clear in the text that unless you're summoned, if you just walk into the presence of the king, that's the death penalty. And so Mordecai says, don't think you're going to escape. When all this happens, you'll die too. So it's better to take the chance and to step before the king. And she makes a famous speech where at the end she says, and if I die, I die. If I perish, I perish. And so she prays. She tells Mordecai, tell all the people to fast for the next couple of days and to pray. And I will pray and I will find a way to do this. And so, trembling, after a few days, she walks into the throne room. The king is there. He notices her, shows favor, and he says, why is the queen here? What can I do for you? And she's basically, I'm so sorry to enter your presence, but I would love to have a banquet, and I would love to invite you and Haman. And so the king is like, okay, that'd be great. And Haman's like, wow, I get invited to the queen's banquet. Well, one of the nights at that time, one of the evenings, the king actually can't sleep. And so to help him go to sleep, he calls in one of his lawyers and says, hey, read me some of the records of some of the official palace business. And what had happened just a few months before that was Mordecai was outside the gate, and he actually heard two of the Persian guards talking about a coup to kill the king. And so Mordecai had actually alerted the king's army, and they actually saved the king's life. Mordecai had never been rewarded, even recognized for this. So that night the king had that read, and he realized, did we ever reward that Jewish man? And he has no idea that he's related to Esther. And his lawyer says, no, I don't believe we did. And so the next morning Haman arrives, feeling good about himself. He's been promoted several times. And it is really comical because the king says to Haman, Haman, what do you think the king should do to honor a faithful subject? Haman thinks he's talking about him. And Haman's like, well, I would probably put a nice robe on him, put him on a really cool white stallion, walk him through town, maybe have a herald, someone walking in front of him saying, thus does the king do for a servant he honors. And so Haman's thinking that's going to be him. And the king says, that's a good idea. I want you to walk in front of the horse for Mordecai. Now remember, Haman hates Mordecai. Mordecai is his mortal enemy. And so he is humiliated because Mordecai gets on this horse, Haman grabs the rope, and he goes through town going, such the man is honored who favors the king. And so he just is humiliated. He's ashamed. He runs back to his house. He can't believe what he had to do. But he takes solace because soon he's going to go to the banquet at the queen's request. And so the night comes. He and the king go to the queen's quarters. And there's actually a series. I'm going to just kind of cut to the chase here, that she concludes a meal for them, and we get into chapter 7. For verse 2, we read, the king said to Esther on the second day, because he actually does this 2 days, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Queen Esther replied, if I found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Now, if we'd only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for the trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king. And then King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, well, who is he and where is he who would presume to do this? And of course, Haman's right there. And Esther said, a foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman all of a sudden thinks that he is getting another elevation, and he realizes he's about to be killed, most probably. And so the king steps away to think about this. Haman actually falls at the feet of Esther to say, please have mercy, please don't do this. When the king comes back, it looks like Haman's actually assaulting the queen. And so the king is like, in my own house, you're going to try to abuse my wife? And unfortunately for Haman, he had actually had gallows built, where they hang people, with the hope of hanging Mordecai. And actually has told the king, Haman actually got the gallows ready, and the king said, use them, kill Haman. And he does. Now, the law that the king had signed, really again not paying attention, or the edict, was the law of the Medes and Persians. And that phrase is important because it's irrevocable. It's not that he could sign a second law and say, hey, I revoke that first law. It couldn't happen. But what the king could do, and what Mordecai asked, was let the Jews arm themselves and we'll be ready when they attack. And so the king agreed. And so the Jews all over the provinces, they got swords, they got weapons. And so when they were attacked, they actually won the battle. Because of Mordecai's faithfulness, he was actually elevated, and he was placed like the place that Haman had. So much like Joseph, you remember the Old Testament story of Joseph, who was at the top of the government of Pharaoh, just beneath Pharaoh. Well, that's going to be Mordecai here. Now, it's also important that later Mordecai sent word in the very last chapter, the next last chapter, chapter 9, verse 20, that Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same month annually. And so they instituted a feast, and the name of the feast is Purim. You may have heard of that. Jews to this day still celebrate the feast of Purim. And the word comes from pur, P-U-R, which means lot. And so when he cast the lot to pick the day of destruction of the Jews, the plural for that, like lots, is Purim. And so even to this day, it's not one of the three festivals that they have to travel, not three of the pilgrim feast. You've remembered those three. But this is a different one, and it commemorates when Queen Esther had the courage to go before the king and to request that her people, the Jewish people, could defend themselves. I've been at a Feast of Purim before with Jews and Jewish believers in Christ, and it's interesting. They get the kids involved because they read the story, and every time they mention Haman, the bad guy, all the kids yell, boo, and then they keep with the story, and they retell the story, how God was faithful, and how he raised up Esther at that time. And there's a famous line in there. She says, who knows, maybe for such a time as this, I have been placed in this role. So what to remember about the story of Esther? Number one, it's the only book that doesn't mention God, and that's important to remember that differentiation. Number two, I guess there are four characters to remember. King Ahasuerus, who is also King Xerxes, the king from 300. Haman, the Persian official who opposed the Jews and ultimately was executed because of his attempt to annihilate the Jews. And then the two Jewish heroes, Esther, Queen Esther, who was taken just out of near poverty because of her beauty and made the queen. And then her cousin Mordecai, who was faithful and also became a leader in the empire because of his faithfulness and that he was trustworthy. All right, so that's going to be it today. You'll get out a little bit early. I'm sure that will not bother you. Go ahead and read ahead. We'll look at Job, probably the oldest book actually written in the Bible, and a fascinating story with some troubling applications, but we'll talk about that when we meet on Wednesday. So take care and God bless.